I knew the things, but I didn't recognize it in myself until probably when my son was born, and I was in a car park circling around to try to find a spot and needed to go to the supermarket, and then did a few laps and then went, no, I can't park the car, I can't go in there today. And I went home and I went, I'm pretty sure that's not a normal reaction.
Hello, I'm Dr. Jodie Richardson, and you're listening to Well, Hello Anxiety, a podcast where we end the struggle with anxiety and build our toolkit of practical skills to thrive. Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I'm here today with Nic Topp. Nicole and I have known each other for a very long time, and it's just going to be such a joy to have a good old chat with Nicole today. Nicole's a naturopath, and Nicole's coming to us today from her cupboard. Hello, Nicole.
How's it going? Thanks so much for having me in here. Just for a bit of background on that, there's a tradie next door working, and I didn't want to have a whole lot of noise for you. So I know that the sound is a bit better in here. I don't normally hang out in my cupboard, but, you know, it's all good.
I think there's probably a few parents who are trying to hang out in the cupboard. It might be one of the few places you might not get interrupted.
I don't know. I reckon probably the laundry is the best place these days. No one goes looking for you in the laundry.
This is true. Most definitely you don't hide in the pantry, which is one of the frequent hiding spots in our house if we're playing hide and seek. But 100%. It's certainly somewhere you'll be found out pretty quickly these days. So how are things going for you, Nic? I know you're in Victoria as well.
Yeah, no, look, we've hit our sweet spot. We're just making things work, and our happy little bubble's pretty good as a general rule. You know, there are some days with remote learning that you kind of go, oh my goodness. And then there are other days that you go, we're rocking this boat. Like we're doing really well. This is awesome. So, you know, I think that's really natural and normal. And most of the clients that I speak to are in the same kind of boat too. It's just some days it's a storm and other days it's calm sea.
Oh, it is. And some days it's stormy seas and calm seas, then stormy seas and calm seas.
Yeah, totally. And that's
for
totally
15
normal.
hours. Pardon?
And that's totally normal.
and you have, and you're comfortable talking about that you experience some social anxiety, don't you, yourself?
Yeah,
like you and anxiety are well acquainted.
We're
are
great friends and frenemies sometimes, but great friends. You know, I've had to learn to love it because there is so much to love about that brain. There really, truly is. And the more we embrace it, the better everything is as a general rule anyway. I mean, you know, we all know that. But yeah, look, I was just like many people that I speak with, and I didn't really know what it was. I'll be honest. You know, even though I'd trained, we didn't really spend a great deal of time on it when we were studying, but I knew the things, but I didn't recognize it in myself until probably when my son was born, and I was in a car park circling around to try to find a spot and needed to go to the supermarket, and then did a few laps and then went, no, I can't park the car, I can't go in there today. And I went home and I went, I'm pretty sure that's not a normal reaction when you go in to get some things and you come out without anything. And it was interesting. And then I started to notice a few more things. And then I noticed how peppered it was throughout my entire life, from childhood, you know, and we've all got those stories of, and I want to say trauma, but I also want to be really clear on what trauma is. It doesn't mean that something bad has happened. It's that something happened and then we perceive the world in a very different way. So we make it mean something about ourselves. So it's not that, you know, we've got millions and millions of people who have had something really atrocious happen. It's not actually, I mean, that happens, but that's not really the definition of trauma these days. It's more about how we perceive the world to be because of the thing that happened and what we make it to believe, what we make it to believe to be true.
Oh, thank you for that definition, because it's fascinating. It is. And, you know, most of us, you know, I'm 47 and I won't ask you how old you are. That would
I'm
not
in my
be
40s. I don't know how many years have we lost in lockdown. I must be 41.
I don't know, 553.
I think I've aged about 40 years, actually.
I'm preparing a presentation for tomorrow night, and I'm using one of those memes where it's got, you know, Janice has been teaching home learning for 5 days, and Janice is killing it, and Janice looks about 90.
Yeah, 100%.
You know,
yes.
got to add a little bit of humor. Yeah, it's good to have that definition because, you know, when all of us look back on our lives, I think, you know, probably most of us can look back and recognize a time whereby we had something happen or we experienced something that made us feel, see the world differently, see the world through a new lens. And, I think when we do hear the word trauma, we expect something to be catastrophic, and it
Yes.
absolutely can be, but it
And
doesn't have to be.
it still is in our own perception of our world, like
Mm.
it can be something as simple as or a teacher calling you out on something and you making that mean that you're not smart. And that just starts from there. And so it can snowball. And it's not to place blame on any one person, of course not. But it's just the simple fact that it can be actually quite minute, but it's meant something to you or that individual. And we see it in kids all the time at the moment, and suddenly they don't think that they're good enough. And that just has a self-perpetuating circle and spiral, which can be, really difficult to break if you don't have the tools and if you're not able to look at it constructively compared to a little bit more like a self-combustion issue, I suppose. So it is a matter of critically thinking your way around those things, but also figuring out what some of those triggers are and how they've come about. So, we've all got little things that will trigger us, and sometimes it's just something someone says or does, or there's so many different ways that we can be triggered, and without really realizing why that upsets us, it's just a longer journey as a general rule. So
That is honestly, I had a conversation with a friend the other day, and I was finding that one of the things that was happening in the house with one of the kids was really amping me up in a way that seemed really irrational and seemed really disproportionate in the way I was feeling. And she asked me that exact question. I'd also had 3 hours sleep the night before, which did not help because, lockdown. And I had sort of gotten through the day, and I've been really aware of my sleep deprived state and trying to take really good care of myself. But I was my buttons were being pushed, and I said to my friend, well, she said to me, what is it in particular about this that is really bothering you so much? And it was such a great question. And it goes to what you were just saying, is that the more we can understand ourselves, then we can learn to not only manage that and deal with that, but we can learn to manage better, I suppose, when in circumstances when that might be, a situation that might be triggering that or bringing
100%.
something new up.
Yeah, and I think the difference there is between reacting and responding. And sometimes it's 5 or 10 seconds. Like, I had the experience yesterday. I was really impatient with my kids. I'll be really honest. It's just what it goes round and round in circles. Like I said before, some days our bubble's amazing, and other days I'm like, oh my goodness, I won't, share any expletives here because I'll keep it clean. But that is my organic language also. But look, when it came down to it, I was like, why are they just really grinding my gears right now? And it's because I was in a certain state. I was trying to work. I was trying to write something quite technical. I was working on a patient's case, and it was a really complex case, and I was trying to do the things while they're running around having a break, or probably should have been, doing their learning or whatever else. And I had to consistently took breaths because it wasn't their fault. It was my state, not theirs. But I could have reacted rather than responded. And if I'd reacted, I'd have shouted. But by responding and taking a breath and going, okay, it's because I'm trying to juggle things, and perhaps I'm overwhelmed, and perhaps, just all the things that are going on at the moment. It's not them, it's my internal space. And so it's really about making sure that we can get on top of that and creating and finding some sense of peace, even when you're in the middle of the storm. And that is key in my household. And even the kids have learned to do that too, because the story goes, it's not just with me with anxiety. Both of my kids have experienced anxiety as well. And, with current climate, it's been a little on and off from time to time too, although it's also created this incredible bravery from my youngest, who just goes, do you know what? I feel like this all the time. At least she knows how other people are feeling, and she helps them now because she's so used to it. It's just one of those things where she goes, I know what that feels like. It feels horrible, and it will pass, because it's within every cell of your being, isn't it? You actually, every cell does respond. That's what cortisol does. Cortisol is a hormone that basically triggers, it's a hormonal response. It's a stress response, but it's a hormonal response, and it triggers every single cell in the body, which is incredible. And that's why anxiety can be difficult to sort of pinpoint unless you really know what the tells are, I suppose.
I love that you taking us down this path. And I'd love you to, share with our listeners today, if we could go back to sort of what happens in the anxious brain. I love your perspective on this. I love how you share this in a way that's really easy for people to understand. But I think it makes such a difference. I remember, talking to Peter, my husband, and explaining to him about anxiety and the brain and how it actually kind of works and what happens. And he was like, that makes so much sense, and it helps to put everything else into place. So could you take us through that?
Yeah, sure, definitely. I actually even did a few dot points so I don't take you on a wild tangent, because I have this, once I start to get passionate, not only do I sometimes get sweary, and I will not do that, but sometimes I go off into wild tangents. So I've just dot pointed a few things to keep it really, really clear, because I could discuss this for weeks. Look, stress, basically we have like a good stress, and we have a tolerable stress, and then we have a toxic stress. So, and really the difference there is just duration. How long have we been stressed for? The good stress, as we all know, it feels focusing and motivating, and there's drive, and it feels good. Like, it actually feels good to have a little bit of stress in the body. That's really, really cool. And it's still okay when we go into the tolerable stress, which will just sort of get us over the edge. Like, you've got a work deadline, or you've got somewhere you're supposed to be. And so it's all stations, it's all systems go, let's keep going. That's okay if it's not for too long. But when we get to the toxic stage, and I really dislike that word, but it's just super easy to remember, when we're there, we're in the sprint, and we're way past the sprint. We're in the marathon, except we've used all of our sprinting. So we're depleted and we're exhausted, and it creates a much bigger issue, basically. So we've got to be able to notice when we're getting in between the tolerable and then into that sort of more toxic realm. And unfortunately, every email, every phone call, every bit of information, because we're living in such an information-saturated world at the moment, that it's not hard to go from just that tolerable to more of a toxic stage. So part of that is a duration thing. It's how long has it been going on for? Because we know for the short sprint, we get the adrenaline and the noradrenaline, and also we get that hormone aspect of the cortisol, which, as a side note, and I won't go too far into this, but it is also really well responsible for our hormones being thrown out, for that, that spare tire around our belly, and all the reasons why we can't shift weight, because stress has so much to do with it in our cortisol levels. But, I'll bring that tangent back in, and I won't go down there right now. But we just need to talk about what happens in that alarm phase, so that first phase of, like, let's go down the saber-toothed tiger, realm of, oh my goodness, it's fight or fright or freeze. We've got to get out of there, or we've got to take it on, or we're going to freeze. And the freeze is really, really interesting for mental health and for anxiety, because and depression too, because I feel that there's a real swings and roundabout thing that happens with depression and anxiety. It's the highs and the lows, and the more we can understand where we're at, the easier it is and more gentle and kind we can be to ourselves, compared to just consistently beating ourselves up. But that's another whole issue too. So when we get back to that real, needing to rest after we've had this big, scare or fright or whatever it is, back in the dark ages, we'd then spend time to recover and rest and nourish and look after ourselves, except we don't do that anymore. We keep pushing. So we try to get back to a homeostatic kind of level, which is, just all about getting back to where we were, but we don't. So we build this thing called allostatic load, which then becomes more of a chronic issue when we raise the bar and we go, okay, this is our normal now. And then we have more stress and we raise the bar a bit more, and it's like, okay, this is our normal, until we get to a point where we're so tired and wired, and then we just don't have that feeling of peace or rest. We don't feel balanced. We just don't feel quite right. It's not anything alarming for a lot of people, which is why it goes unnoticed for such a long time. But it's at that point now where we're kind of, adrenally exhausted, and that cortisol for such a long period of time really messes with our HPA axis, which really then has an extra, kick-on effect for our hormones too, and our sleep. So, you talked about sleep just before, and that's like the ultimate reset, right? It's like when we shut down our computer, it actually, the next day it works a little better and it restarts a little better, and the body's the same. We spend that sleep time, that time when we're asleep, detoxifying our body. It gives our organs the time to do what they've got to do, because we're not moving around the day and we're not consistently being met with new things. It gives our lymphatic system a bit of time to drain, particularly in our brain. So the lymphatics again, that's another massive topic, but it's all about allowing that. It's kind of like the sewage in the household to just sort of seep out and then be able to move through those lymphatic points. And then, we pass that through the incredible detoxification systems that we have. And the lymphatic one definitely being something that's overlooked so frequently. So we get to this stage where there's like all of this exhaustion and we're just consistently pushing until we flatline. I'm a big believer of we get a little tap on the shoulder and a little wallop over the back of the head, and then eventually the rug gets pulled out from underneath us because we're just not paying attention. And I even thought about it. I was discussing with the kids the other day. I'm like, when you're on your bike and you're like going down the start of the hill, it's like, whoa, I'm about to go down this hill. This is kind of exciting and it's motivating and all of your senses are like pinging. Then you're halfway down the hill and you're like, ooh, this is getting a bit like, this is a big hill. And then by the third stage, it's proper speed wobbles and then you're off your bike.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same with our stress response. And we don't want off the bike. We want the little bit of woohoo and even the little bit of the wobbly bit, but we don't want to completely spill and end up all over the place. And I mean, it depends on how technical you want me to get on this, because I even made sure that I was not going to take this too far, but, far enough to be able to describe what goes on. Because I do want to make sure that we discuss a little bit about neuroplasticity, because this is kind of exciting. And about this as well. It's really, really cool because whatever we do to the brain, we can undo as well. So it's not like, oh my gosh, we're all, in all sorts of trouble. We can actually climb our way out and we can stop ourselves from sinking in too far. I call it I won't say the word, but the S pit. When you're in the pit, it's harder to get out. You got to catch yourself before you get in, okay? Because it's like a default setting for a lot of us. Everybody has one area within their health that is kind of like a default setting of a barometer of, okay, you're not doing the things that are going to keep your body healthy and happy. And for me, I can get wobbly and notice the overwhelm starting, and I'm like, whoa, that's my barometer. I notice when that's happening.
I love that. I love that metaphor that you shared about going down the hill on the bike. And don't you find, as an adult, if you ever find yourself in that situation, it's way more scary than
way
it
more
ever
scary
seemed when you're
we
a
don't
kid.
bounce. We don't bounce quite as much. We just break.
That's the thing. So, I really love that there's enough stress that's motivating, nothing like a deadline and not quite enough time.
100%.
And so motivating, and that's sort of like at the start, we're geared up, but then as you continue down, it's sort of like you can notice, oh, hang on a second, this is just getting a little bit out of hand, and that's about the time when we want to put the brakes on. We want to be able to bring it back, but for all of us at some stage or another, we'll get the speed wobbles and kind of crash because we've not been able to put management strategies into place. And like you say, there's the tap on the shoulder, there's the whack on the head, and then there's the rug that comes out from under you. So when it comes to, and I'd love to go into neuroplasticity and we'll come to that, but as a naturopath working with clients, and, basically on your website it says if it's got to do with anxiety,
we're all over it.
I'm your gal, basically.
Yeah.
In terms of the management strategies that you share, what tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so there's some definite things that are like a core principle, and I laugh about it because they're so freaking simple, but you've got to do it. And that's where it can be a little difficult. So I think sometimes in our modern society, we're looking for a quick fix. We want things just to be simple and easy and straightforward. We want some magical, whether it's herbal pill or whatever pill you want that feeling of being just everything's okay and at peace. And yet there's this beautiful learning, and I'm huge on, having signs along the way of like, what can we learn from this? And, what haven't I learnt yet because it keeps happening, or, however else you're sort of navigating through. So there's a definite core, there's a core principle of, obviously the gut-brain connection is massive, and it is really important because what you're putting into your body every day is either going to make things better or not. So, and that's, we talk about control a little bit when it comes to anxiety and depression, because it's a feeling of not being in control when you're feeling anxious. There's too many things going on all at once. And, I kind of liken it to the juggler who spins the plates at the circus, or used to anyway, goodness knows what happens now. But, you just sort of give the one that was looking like it was getting wobbly a little bit more attention until another one looked wobbly. So it was like this constant sort of juggle of trying to get everything right and keep going. But there is a definite core thing around making sure that you're not having the foods that are going to be really triggering to the body. Have a little bit. Look, I ate donuts last lockdown and I drink gin every so often. I'm not a purist at all. I would hate for people to think that I do all of the right things for my body. Some days the right thing for my body is a soul thing, and I want the piece of chocolate cake or the donut or the whatever, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to do that and I'm going to enjoy it every step of the way without any guilt, because for the rest of the time I do the best that I can with what I've got. Some days it's not lots, and that's okay too. We just rebuild on the days that we're able to do everything that we can. So the core thing here is, eliminating foods that are a little bit irritating to the body, which are, the normal ones are just, your sugar, your dairy, your wheat. They're the most common. It's not for everyone. And obviously this is on a very individual basis, but that's what I see most commonly. The other thing that I see most commonly is, really pulling back on the flavors and additives and things in foods. It's kind of like, and I talk about magnesium like this. Magnesium is kind of like having a bouncer at the brain going, no, you may not pass. If you've got plenty of magnesium, it's like, let's get this balance right. You're not allowed in. You can stay out. Yeah, you can come in. You're all right. If we don't have enough magnesium and we have too many of the foods that cause irritation within the gut, and particularly the ones that cross the blood-brain barrier as far as those additives and preservatives are concerned, because they're actually like a neuroexcitatory molecule, which is, another whole day. But it's like the bouncer goes home and lets all of the 3-year-olds that are high on caffeine in, and they're bouncing around all over the place. They're shouting, they're screaming, they're crying, they're fighting. It's not a great place to be. I almost swore and I caught myself. I'm doing really well today.
I think there's, in terms of the rating, you can set the podcast for different ratings. Nice. And so far we've all kept it nice. Even Craig Harper, who, if you've ever heard Craig speak, he can do it. It is possible. And
it just organically comes out and I'm like, whoa. And part of me goes, I'm not speaking authentically, but the other part of me goes, no, let's keep it clean.
Yes, well, we know a lot of people listening, like it or not, have a lot of little people around at the moment, don't they?
Correct. So keeping it nice. But look, it is just an interesting thing when you start to just notice what foods have certain responses within the body, but it's particularly those preservatives and colors and things like that once, and MSG and pre-MSG, so they're cheeky little buggers. A lot of the flavorings that we have in, and I won't name brands, but there are certain brands you can still get the same type of food. Let's just talk about salt and vinegar salt and vinegar chips, for example, because this has been one of those issues in our household. My son loves salt and vinegar chips, and I'm like, okay, every so often, absolutely. But we're going to be checking out what's on that nutritional panel to make sure it hasn't got the 627 and a lot of those sixes that are in there that are like a pre-MSG and can be quite excitatory to the brain. Even though he's really calm and cool, it's still not great. So we just try to make sure that we choose a brand that doesn't have that in there. Still have that food every so often, because life's meant for living. We're supposed to enjoy ourselves. But let's just try to make sure that they're the best choices we can come up against so that we are able to consistently do it rather than feel like we're depriving ourselves of the one thing we can have right now.
Great. Yeah. And I know, and I've seen you post before that, you'll suggest, say, plain potato chips, which are really just vegetable oil, potato and salt.
Correct.
But when we are looking, if we are looking at ingredients, and we know that in a nutritional panel or ingredients panel that the ingredient that there is the majority of the product is the first listed and the least amount of ingredient in the product is the last listed. But even so, trace amounts can obviously make a big difference. What are we looking for? And if you could say three ingredients that would be your top 3 to kind of avoid, what would they be?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I'm going to make it even more simple. So the rule in our house is if you can't pronounce it, you can't eat it. It's just that simple.
Great. Okay.
So when we're looking at a panel that has numbers on it, well, we don't know what those numbers are. If we have to look that up and then you still can't pronounce it, probably best we don't put it in our body. A lot of those 6 numbers, a lot of the colors and flavorings and additives, we try to go for 0. Look, you can't avoid them when you're at a party. You can't avoid them when, the kids are one day at someone else's house. But there are certain things that I just go, well, do you know what? 90% for the 90% of the body, which we talk about 90% for the body, 10% for the soul. But if 90% of the time we are doing the best we possibly can to avoid those kinds of things, we're going to be doing really, really well. And everybody is really different as to what's best to avoid and what's best not to avoid. I have a massive love for coffee, and I will have a coffee every day. It was my first love. My husband is well aware of this, and we even have an inbuilt coffee machine. So I'm not going to give that up, but I do notice when I abuse it. So there are some days where I just feel a bit flat, a little bit funky, and I'll go, I'll have another coffee. That'll get me through the day, which goes against every single naturopathic principle that I have, because probably what I needed to do is rest a little bit, probably take a break from, computer work or whatever it is that I'm doing. Probably just need to go outside and just sit tight for a little bit so that I can do something that feels nourishing and restorative. But instead, I'm going to smash that coffee because I've got things that have to be done. That does happen every so often. I'm not going to say that I don't do it, but it's happening less and less often because it makes me feel a bit wobbly and a bit off. I get a bit shaky, and it's very, very similar to what anxiety feels like in my body. Now, everyone's different, but for me, my hands shake a little bit. My concentration is a bit clouded. My focus is very tunnel. I can't handle noise. Noise just really irritates me, like anything that's a bit outside of my zone, and it's just, I don't know, it's irritating like the kids. Those things irritate me too, and all signs of overwhelm, but all signs of what's going on in my body. And my gut can sometimes feel a little bit funny too. And again, caffeine does all of that. So being really, really logical and just not abusing it, cutting it back, that's probably a really big one for adults. A little bit different with kids. We want to cut back the sugar. We need to cut back the sugar with adults too, but kids particularly are really quite noticeable. But let's look at it this way with adults as well. Blood sugar levels that are going up and down and all over the place, it's also going to mimic those anxiety feelings, because low blood sugar level also gives you a bit of a funny head. It gives you a little bit of the wobbles. It can make your tummy feel a little bit funny too, and a little bit dizzy and just a little bit not quite present, grounded and peaceful. So it also makes sense. And because I really like to keep things simple, because I'm really lazy and I don't like to do things. So it has to be really, really simple. Because if I can't do them, I can't expect anyone else to do them. So just making sure that our blood sugar levels are pretty good. If you have that mad craving of something, sure, have a taste, do it, guilt-free, but make sure that it's, not as often as what it would be if you were just open slather. But your blood sugar levels of making sure you've got little bits of protein dotted throughout the day, you're consistently having whole, real food. Just keep it super simple. The less things that have had human interference, the better. So I hope that answers your question. It was a bit convoluted, but
No, look, thank you, and I'm sort of in my head, I'm sort of summarizing, and that when we start to talk about management strategies, we've firstly got to recognize what's happening, when there's that tap on the shoulder, that you've talked about the importance of nutrition and how anxiety is individual, and I love Carly Taylor in episode 1. She talked about sort of doing exercises with her clients, but calling them sort of experiments. And this is what you're suggesting, if you try to reduce sugar, see how it feels. Yeah. Try dairy or wheat, see how it feels. These are things that can, impact that gut-brain axis, which might be another episode. And, obviously the coffee, and it's really interesting when it comes to coffee, because we know that coffee causes a release of cortisol.
Yeah.
And so, and then you touched on the blood sugars. And I know when because we go into fight or flight, that the body dumps blood sugar into our bloodstream. So those sort of peaks and troughs, and we want to sort of try to maintain fairly stable blood sugars. So so you've given us so much already.
Just on that dumping the sugars into the blood, and this is another trick that I use consistently with people, and I find this to be useful because you don't need anything for it. It's kind of like, do you have an old school mower? Like where you have to prime it, like you've got to press the little bubble.
Yes, I think we do.
Yeah,
I think there's one in the garage somewhere.
So perfect, because we're priming the motor to get the fuel to where it needs to be. But if you don't pull the ripcord and get the motor going, it's just going to sit there. And in the body, that's exactly what's going on. We've primed the motor. We're ready to run. We're ready to get out of there. And yet we haven't moved and used it. So if you're feeling really wobbly, moving your body is like the number one thing to be able to do. And even if it's just a slow stagger around the house, that's at least something to get that that bit of energy out for sure. And it's probably one of the top, things that we'll look at doing individually with people, just to get rid of that edge, literally, of that feeling, because it's a horrible feeling when it's just, we all know, because who else is listening?
Yeah. It's all revved up with no place to go.
That's
and,
right, yeah.
Like you say, every cell in the body, everything's preparing you to fight or flee, which involves movement. But we can often be in bed trying to go to sleep, or sitting down in a Zoom meeting, or it is a really difficult situation to manage without actually putting movement into the picture.
Correct.
And it's the natural end to the fight or flight response.
That's
movement.
right.
That's what the body's preparing to do. So that racy feeling can be sort of settled by, like you say, just starting to get up and move around. And
I've
you
been
have to
known
run a
to do star
marathon.
jumps before a presentation, because I'm just like, like it's a good thing because it gets my energy going. But I'm also like, I just need to get that nervous energy out too, though.
Yes. Yeah, perfect. Oh, I'm so glad you came back to that. And one of the things that there's so many different directions I could go, but I know that before you were talking about neuroplasticity.
Yeah.
And so could you start by sharing a metaphor? You're so good with these, or an analogy, and giving us a bit of an idea, or giving our listeners a bit of an idea about sort of what happens in a brain when you've been repeatedly doing the same thing versus bringing in change. And
So let's look at what happens first and how the brain actually restructures. They call it neuroplasticity because it means that it can change. This is a really good thing. This is exciting. It means that if it can go one way, it can go another way as well. I just realized how much I use my hands when I'm expressing myself. All you can see is my fingertips. and no one's going to know what I'm doing as a listening. So I look at it as, okay, cool. Neurons that fire together wire together. So that makes it really, really strong in certain ways. And we're kind of in ground a little bit. I kind of liken it to, and I was chatting with a counsellor about this a while ago, and she actually, alerted me to one of the analogies that she uses. It's kind of like getting a piece of wood and then getting a pen and then drawing a certain pathway, right? Even if it's just a little bit of an arc. And then deciding that you'll start that arc, but you want to go in a different direction. And you've got this ingrained deep pathway from doing it all the time. And then trying to go in the other direction, it's like a bit bumpy and it's hard to kind of change the direction and you can't get out of that groove. And it is definitely something that has to be worked on. Now, what actually happens within the brain with that, let's say the negative neuroplasticity first, is that the amygdala actually gets bigger, because we're on that neural pathway, that consistent firing, all of that fear and that worry and that concern. And I even talk about, I don't know if you're familiar with the Smurfs, but for some reason this always sticks in my head, and I worry that it's a really average analogy, but I'm going to use it anyway because it just pops out. I look at the amygdala being like Gargamel, it's like dark and it's red and it's frightening and it's like wants to stomp on all of those lovely little Smurfs. And then I look at the hippocampus as being, that's where our memory and our learning and our emotional stability and our mood stability is all coming from. And I look at that as Smurfette, because of course it's got to be a female in this particular situation to remember stuff, right? I've got to be careful. And yet, here she is shrinking away when we're looking at the brain structure. So the amygdala is getting bigger and Smurfette, or the hippocampus, is getting smaller. And the prefrontal cortex, well, that's just offline. We just can't, we can't be part of that. And that's our flexibility and our response and our, being able to move forward in a spatial and an understanding kind of way. But it just goes straight into survival mode. So what we can do is we can actually get back, and we can actually help to, put the brakes on basically the glutamate, which is like the accelerator to the car. Okay, so you want to put your foot on the accelerator, and that's like glutamate, cortisol, glutamate, all the adrenalines, everything doing all of the things. It's just spinning everything into some kind of chaos. And then that also has an impact on the BDNF, which is like the modulating structure. So here we are just in I nearly swore again, a poop storm of what could happen within the brain, and we're turning up inflammation in general, and we're firing all of the neurons that are causing more fear, more worry. The more we use it, the bigger it grows and the bigger it gets. So then when we flip that back around and we start to take that away and dismantle it and notice that actually we are safe. And some of the very, very simple things, and I'll share it with you now so that I don't forget, is I get people to put their hand on their chest, and you can do it now if you want. I'm sure you've done this before, and one hand on your belly, and just notice where your breath is. So it's really, really simple. And I don't always put my hands on my body if I'm out and I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed, but I just pay attention and I just notice where my breath is. And as I can breathe into my belly and stimulate that vagus response, that vagus nerve, it's like resetting. And I'm sure we've all seen like what happens when a bird hits your window and then like it staggers off and it's like breathing really shallow with its beak really, really open. It's the exact opposite of what we want to bring back in. So when you're feeling that feeling and then you start to notice where your breath is and start to breathe down, and we do box breathe, there's a whole lot of different types of breathing that you can do, obviously. But it just helps to offset that. And it's literally like one of the number one things that you can do absolutely anywhere. I'm all for finding things that are simple, that you don't need any kind of magical environment for, because who's going to do it? I know I won't. So it's got to be simple. And it's really then about helping to recreate those other neural pathways to then notice that actually, even though the amygdala is just saying, hey, are you okay? It's a full body response. And so we instantly think it's a feeling before a thinking, and it's something that we've felt before and we think we're not okay, when actually we probably are. And, there's all of the other things of what can I see, what can I hear, what can I smell? But that's a whole other time. Just simply the breath and coming back to that is a really good start, which will help to bring the brain back to, small amygdala, big hippocampus, prefrontal cortex back online, and just be able to fire on all cylinders again.
Yes, and it's so important to understand about the brain, because it helps make sense of helps make sense of what's happening, and the idea that the prefrontal cortex, which is behind our forehead, is unavailable, exactly as you said. It's offline, and so
Computer says
that's
no.
why. Say again.
Computer says no. Like
Computer says no.
it's no. Not
Shut
doing
down. And it's what that means is that when we are highly anxious, we can be really irrational, because that thinking and executive function part of the brain just ain't available. And
that's the
that's
reaction
why,
compared to the response, right? It's purely what it
yes.
is. Yeah.
Yes. And that's, when I've spoken with parents before, and I know you say the same thing, it's that, well, in the moment, in the high anxiety moment, is not the moment for problem solving.
Yeah.
It's sometimes there can be anxiety, and it might be in children, or it might be in ourselves or in our partner. But we need to help settle the brain and calm the system, breathing, movement, etc., and then revisit a little bit later when that prefrontal cortex has come back online, because there's no talking somebody out of feeling anxious.
No, no one in the history
so
of calming down has ever calmed down by being told to calm down. It just doesn't happen.
It's such a running joke here. It probably is in a lot of houses, and I've had anxiety for a long time, as have you. Yep. And our partners, partners of anxious people, it's a big learning curve if they're not anxious themselves, or it's just an extra added bonus of being in a relationship with somebody like us. And Peter used to say, "Calm down," and we've moved on from that response. Although I did still find something. Yeah, we're still together. I did find myself. It seems to be innate, because I remember being in the car and something happened, and it's a very, very rare day when he gets startled or anxious, and I said, "Calm down." I don't know what came over me, because because I'm human. He looked at me. He's like, "I am never letting you forget this."
That's interesting though, right? Just to bring a little bit of light on how different people react in certain situations. I am outwardly very calm. Nobody would know what's going on in my head, whereas your partner would know. Mine would not. He wouldn't have a clue unless I actually go, "Oh, hey, feeling a bit weird." It's just a catch cry in our house. That's my youngest says, "I feel weird." And we're like, "Yeah, of course you do," because that's how she recognizes that her body is having a response. And so we have all of the tools ready to go. But it is very, very interesting that everybody reacts differently. Like your partner will know when you're feeling anxious, whereas I just sort of internalize, and it's all going on under the skin. But to look at me, you would have no idea. It's that duck on the water kind of situation.
It is. It's one of those, we know it's very internal in the way that it can impact our thinking and worry and what if questions and catastrophizing and all of that sort of future focused thinking and retrospective thinking as well.
Yeah.
And we have all these physical manifestations of anxiety. We know that it powers up the body for fight or flight. And so we have, lots of physical symptoms that go with it. But it is one of those things that if you didn't want to talk about it, you can learn to be quite under the radar with it in public, can't you?
Sorry, you go.
No. I think that, we tend not to want to talk about it. I mean, you and I do, but it's taken time for me to get to a point, where I'll talk about it till the cows come home.
Yeah.
And I know you're very open about it. We're both really passionate about helping people to understand it, and it helps by sort of sharing our experiences. But, for a long time there, I just wore a mask, and I sort of wondered when I started to talk about it if people would go, what?
Yeah.
What? You feel like that? You've been through that? It's like people wouldn't know unless you told them. It's just one of those things that, and equally it's hard then because when you do have anxiety and other people around you don't understand it because they can't see it, that's equally hard.
It is. And it's funny, I don't know how you feel about this, but I feel like I have a superpower. I can see through those masks really easily. I'm not going to go pointing them out to people and say, hey, I know what's going on under there. But there's a definite knowing that comes with having your own knowing. And I get so sad when people say, I don't really want to talk about it, because if I had injured myself or if I had cancer, I'd have a million people at the door helping. How can I help you? Do you need food? Do you need this? Do you need that? And I'm sad that mental health still seems to have some kind of stigma. I mean, it doesn't in my world, but I know that it does in others. And I'm trying to understand that more, because the more we become more of our authentic selves and understand who we are and we've all got little idiosyncrasies and goodness knows what else, and strengths. Like, I still see it as a massive strength. Like, you want to come camping with me because I have sorted out all of the things that may need to be done, right? I may have catastrophized everything. I'm not really like that anymore, but at the same time, that's the level of my expert mind that I can think on so many different levels. Not just for me, but I've also thought for my entire family, all of my friends, what they might need or what experiences or whatever else. I mean, it's all useless. Don't get me wrong in the sense of I never needed to have done any of that. But yeah, I am the person that has the random cotton and thread, or was, because I had thought of that. I had thought that your tent might rip and you might need to sort something out. Like, it can be a beautiful thing. It's just that it's creativity not harnessed in the right way. It's stunningly beautiful. I would hate for people to think, oh my goodness, I've got anxiety. It's a problem. It's just got to be directed differently. And we can so do that. We don't actually have to be stuck in it. Not to say you're never going to have an average day. We all do that. That's really normal. Every single person I know has mental health. I'm doing air quotations for those who can't see me, because I can. We've all got mental health, and it just depends on where you're on the spectrum throughout the day or the week or the month or the year. Some of us just don't even want to acknowledge that there's ever anything that's not feeling okay, and my hope and my bigger vision is that we can all just be really, really honest with how we're feeling and what's going on, and not have to hide any of that, because we're supposed to just be okay with it. It's a load of, I'm not going to swear, but it's a load of that. It's not cool.
Yeah.
Bring it up, bring it out. Let's talk about it. It's everywhere, especially now.
Yes.
Everywhere. Let's just do it. Feels better.
It does. It does. It's so healing just to talk about it and just to chat with someone who says, you know what, I know what that's like. I know how hard that is, and just not necessarily even to have any solutions. We don't have to provide solutions. And one of the great things that we can all do for someone who shares really how they're going is just provide that empathy and, that validation. And yeah, it's not, and if you wanted to, share a tip or two, and then it could be around the idea of how breathing helps to show the brain that we're safe, and how movement helps us to put the brakes on the stress response. And but at the end of the day, the more we can share, the more we're authentic, which means we're not sort of putting our emotions and how we're feeling behind a damn wall, which we know what happens eventually with that. And other people then feel permission to do the same, don't
Yeah,
they? You know, it's
100%. 100%. And
yes.
honestly, from a person to person thing, not even from a practitioner to client or, colleague or anything like that, just being able to sit with someone, 50% of that healing is done because they are aware that someone's just willing to sit with them and hear them, and that their
Mm,
their thoughts and their feelings are acknowledged, and then there's no more stuffing it down and just trying to push it down and get rid of it. Because yeah, it does. It comes up and out, and it never comes out in the way that you want it to.
never.
So we may as well just kind of go, right, like, let's just get it all out. I actually met a friend this morning for a swim, and it's pretty tumultuous out there today. But it was a matter of, we were both feeling just a bit this morning, and we're like, we just need to get it out. And I'm not as vocal as she is, bless her cotton socks, but she was really shouty in the waves this morning. But she felt so much better by the time she'd gotten it out. And it wasn't even anything in particular. It was just that weird, stuck kind of feeling that was almost restless and sort of like before you lead into that anxiety kind of feel of overwhelm, and just getting that frustration out. I mean, I was just in hysterics, and that's how I shift through. But she was like going at it and calling the waves, all sorts of things, and I'm like, woo. Okay.
Oh,
But however you get it out, you just get it out. If it's just with a mate, if it's with an animal, animals are great listeners. They're so good.
not for shouting at, though.
Please don't shout at your animals. Sorry, I'm not condoning you shout at your animals, but just chatting or sitting or crying, like, see what bubbles up and see what you're really feeling and let that out, because sometimes it's more of a suppression than anything else, because you people worried about how it's going to come up and out, or where it's going to land, or if it's ever going to stop. I mean, I get that in clinic a lot. If I start crying now, will it ever stop? And I'm like, eventually you'll run out of tears.
Yeah. That's it. It's expression. It's so important.
Yeah.
It's under the idea of naming how you're feeling, first and foremost, just really being able to go, I feel like this. Adding on to it, I sort of will say to myself, I feel really low, and that's okay. And I've developed a willingness to sit with my feelings, which, and they tend to move on, because they do move on, going back to the waves, they are like waves. We know that, don't we?
Yeah.
Yes, but the idea of being able to express it in a safe and healthy way that doesn't impact others, like getting out of the water. And, a psychologist I was chatting to a couple of weeks ago, she suggested this balloon smashing game where she was saying her and her family, they'll just blow up balloons, like her and her kids, like her husband's out during the day at work. And, if they need to get out some serious feelings, they just smack those balloons, and it ends up being a really great physical way to express their emotions, but safe and ultimately funny. Yeah. And so you've got this sort of outlet that sort of comes full circle, and then you can go, okay, now
because
I can
don't
get
you
on
reckon
with things.
too? So, like, I love that for kids, but I also love that for adults, because I don't think we're as emotionally intelligent as what we would like to think that we are. And I've been really deep diving into that over the last few years about, not that we need a label for how we're feeling, but I didn't really know. I'm using newer words over the last few years because I'm exploring it. And I think that's part of anxiety too, in that you're not entirely sure how you feel. It just feels not good. So it's been really interesting to actually start to look into, because, we've got categories of emotion. We've got the base emotion of like angry, sad, joy, all the things. It's an interesting thought. So, belching those balloons around is a really awesome way to just try to shift through it, and also just notice that underlying, sometimes there is anger in there, and we just never really wanted to bring it up because, the society that we live in is, it's not that you're not allowed to be angry, but it's a little frowned upon. Like, it's, what have we got to be angry about, and all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, interesting. Very interesting.
It is. And it's that nuanced language, because sometimes we might say, we're anxious when we're feeling anticipation, or when we're nervous, or when we're, a little bit excited even, because
I know,
they can
it's
feel
a
so
reframe
similar.
sometimes. Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. It's there's a beautiful Society 6 They have beautiful emotion wheel cushions.
Yeah.
And I must jump on and get one. I've been meaning to jump on and haven't done a huge amount of online shopping.
Not this time.
I did.
But if an alpaca rocked up one of the other lockdowns, then maybe that's okay. Who knows?
I did at one stage. I jumped on and ordered about 5 different things, and I had to write down what I'd ordered. And then there's one thing that's still coming, and that's an alarm clock, because I had been using my phone beside my bed for an alarm, which I don't want to do. I don't want my phone next to me. And I'm like, it's coming. It must be being built somewhere on the other side of the planet.
I have zero expectation of anything arriving these days.
No. So, no, look, Nic, it's just been such a joy to chat with you. I always love your take on things, and the way that you have such a great way of explaining the different elements of anxiety, and you always do give me a good chuckle as well, because you are so honest.
Yeah, you laugh about it, because otherwise it just feels heavy and average.
That's it. And it's a normal human emotion. Every single person experiences anxiety. We know that it can get really difficult at times, but there are lots of things that we can put into practice. And if one of those strategies for managing anxiety is turning to your lovely self for some help, how can people find you?
Oh, good question. I am around. I'm on socials, and just probably through my website's an easier way, which is just nicoletopp.com.au. There's lots of, free things on there to be able to get yourself started, like now, because there's nothing worse, I feel, than going, okay, I want to do something, and having, no real way to start this minute. Like sometimes we make our decision and we're like, come on. So there's plenty of blogs on there and a lot of it's on my story. I'm very, very open with, what my experience has been, and sometimes a little too open. But, I think it's all in the name of trying to help people to understand where they're at and what's coming up for them. But, yeah, there's lots of things on there that you can have a little bit of a look at to get a little bit more understanding for yourselves there too.
Thanks, Nicole. You're so generous with your knowledge, and I know that you're always researching, and we've had many a good chat about your evidence. Your work is evidence-based, and you're just always looking at the new research that's coming through, and I think that that's such a gift for your clients, that you're so dedicated and committed, and that you get it, you live with it. You know it so well, and so thank you for sharing your wisdom and expertise with us today.
Thank you for having me. It's been fun.
Yeah, it's been. You can get out of your cupboard in a minute.
I know. I was just thinking, how long am I going to sit in here for?
Have you got any snacks?
No. Well, that's a good point.
Oh gosh. Well, thanks again, Nic. Thanks again so much, and I really appreciate it. And we'll look forward to chatting to you again. Will you come back and chat to me on the podcast again another time?
Totally. Whatever topic you like, we'll chat till the cows come home.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks again so much.
Thanks so much, Freddie.
Thank you so much for joining me for this week's episode. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and leave a review. To keep the conversation going, I'd love you to join me over on Instagram. You'll find me at Dr. Jodie Richardson. Also, if you'd like a copy of my free 5-day mini email course, Calm Your Anxious Brain, then jump over to my website, drjodirichardson.com, and you can sign up down the bottom. I've really enjoyed having your company. Thanks so much. See you next time.